It's always exciting. Sometimes there is even between the workmen a bit of a competition. Who will find first?
Okay, if there is a historical Moses, where is this guy? I mean, where was he buried?
According to the biblical tradition, he ended on the other side of the valley.
And he dies where?
At Mount Nebo.
Mount Nebo.
In 2021, the whole world was plunged into a complete state of intense jubilation as scientists from 4 universities discovered the remnants of Noah's Ark, the vessel that saved humanity from being completely wiped out 5,000 years ago. Now, in a recent marine expedition, an even more captivating mystery in history has been solved, bringing to limelight the exact location of the long-hidden tomb of Moses. This discovery, though exciting, has sent ripples of fear through the scientific and theology communities, causing them to question everything they previously knew about faith and history. For a grave that was specially hidden by God Himself, how was it found? And what secrets did this long-lost tomb reveal? Let's find out.
This was a feat that deserved a magnificent burial and a majestic tomb.
The man, Moses. We all know the story of Moses, and if we count the number of biblical figures who shaped the destiny of nations, we know that he would top the list. Moses' legacy is unparalleled. He is celebrated as a prophet like no other, known for his face-to-face encounters with the Lord and his role in performing miraculous signs in Egypt. In fact, his contributions to the Israelite faith and culture were so significant that some have even speculated about the possibility that an ancestral cult would be created to honor his powerful spirit. This great man, who led the Israelites out of the bondage of Egypt and received the 10 Commandments, lived an extraordinary life. From narrowly escaping a child massacre at birth to becoming the chosen one who liberated his people from captivity, Moses' story is nothing short of captivating. But it beats our imagination how the final chapter of such a great man, whom history should confer a special award to, who should be revered in and out of generations, became complicated and ultimately veiled in mystery. His death marked the end of an era, the conclusion of the Exodus journey. Yet, unlike many of his contemporaries, the circumstances of his burial are veiled in secrecy and have sparked centuries of speculation and debate. Even though it was recorded that God Himself buried him in a valley in Moab, near Beth Peor, historians had relentlessly searched for his grave, all to no avail until recently, when a group of archaeologists, unwilling to let this mystery remain unsolved, followed a new lead and made a remarkable discovery of this place, which has been hidden forever. Please join us as we unfold this mystery layer by layer, starting with Miriam, because it was through her that this remarkable discovery was made possible. Miriam. The story of Moses will be incomplete without the mention of his sister, Miriam. Miriam's involvement in Moses' life began with her bravery during his infancy. When Pharaoh issued a decree to kill all Hebrew male babies, Miriam, as Moses' older sister, made a smart move. She devised a plan to save her brother's life by placing him in a basket and setting him adrift on the Nile River, hoping someone compassionate would find him and offer him protection.
Miriam, even as a child, felt so protective over her baby brother and risked so much in approaching the daughter of Pharaoh on his behalf.
And that's exactly what happened. Fortunately for her, Pharaoh's daughter discovered the infant Moses and adopted him as her own. Seizing the opportunity, Miriam boldly approached the princess and offered to find a Hebrew woman to nurse the child, and thanks to her clever arrangement, Moses was raised by his own mother, Jochebed, while still enjoying the privileges of his adoptive Egyptian family. Fast forward to when Moses had grown up and was called by God to lead his people out of Egypt. Miriam was there by his side every step of the way. We've heard of how Moses confronted Pharaoh many times, but we're not aware that he didn't do it alone. Miriam and Aaron were with him at every point, lending their strength and support, but her contributions didn't just stop there. While Moses handled the daunting task of leading the people, Miriam took on the role of encouraging them, and though she was a woman's leader, her strength and wisdom inspired all. But that wasn't all. She was a great musician whose voice could provoke God's intervention, as you will see in the later part of this video. Just after crossing the Red Sea on dry land and witnessing the defeat of Pharaoh and his army, she took a timbrel in her hand, and together with the women, she sang and danced, exalting God for his mighty acts and for liberating them. The full story can be seen in the book of Exodus chapter 15, verse 20. She was all shades of amazing, and oh, did we mention that she was also a prophetess who had a unique connection with the divine and the ability to convey messages from God? Through her prophetic abilities, she was able to inspire and guide the Israelites during their arduous journey, providing them with spiritual sustenance and direction. Now, despite the roles she had played, it was one event that etched her name forever on the sands of time. As the Israelites journeyed through the dry wilderness after their freedom from Egypt, a growing sense of desperation began to take hold. The sun had scorched them so hard that they had to consume more water than usual, that in a short interval, they had completely run out of water.
His theory is that after crossing the Red Sea, the Israelites would have wandered in this very desert. As the team retraced their steps, it was easy to see why water was foremost in their minds.
This was the beginning of their problems. They became weak, the journey slowed down, and the burden got so unbearable, so much so, that despite being happy for the miraculous parting of the Red Sea and the death of the Egyptians' chariots which solidified their freedom, a gloomy spell was cast upon these once vibrant people as they were struggling to survive the harsh wilderness. The cries of the Israelites grew more and more desperate as they begged Moses for help, requesting water to quench their thirst with their cracked voices and dry throats. Feeling the immense weight of leading this large multitude through the unyielding desert and their yells of distress, Moses knew he had to find a solution to their dire predicament. And just as he was contemplating on what to do, a ray of hope shone and presented itself in the form of an oasis called Mara. Excited that God had heard their cries, they rushed to drink from the water, only to discover to their dismay that the water was bitter and undrinkable. With their hopes cruelly dashed, they again cried out in anguish. This time, it was so loud that it echoed across the entire desert, worse than their previous cries, as it seemed to them that they were doomed and would all die in the wilderness. It was in this distress that Moses finally turned to God again for guidance and intervention. While at it, Miriam, his sister, did something unusual. Amid this chaos, she stepped forward and, to the surprise of all, started to sing songs with messages of faith and hope, drawing strength from the God who had delivered them from Egypt. Now, this was the act that moved God. As her song ascended to the heavens, the Lord responded with a miraculous solution. He asked Moses to cast a certain piece of wood into the bitter waters, which Moses did, and to the astonishment of all, this water had transformed into a very sweet water that was safe for drinking. Again, the camp was filled with so much jubilation as the Israelites drank to their fill, and once again, their strength and spirits were renewed.
Well, those 12 springs are still here. Here's one of them behind me that's been cemented in over the years.
In recognition of Miriam's significant role in this moment of divine intervention, the created well was named after her. From that day forward, this well, which was shaped like a sieve-like rock, provided them water and followed the Israelites on their journey, providing a constant source of fresh, pure water wherever they went. Yes, you heard that right. It followed them up and down hills, and whenever they paused their journey, it would settle opposite the tabernacle. And whenever the people needed water, an elder from each of the 12 tribes would approach the well of Miriam with a staff or stick, chanting words to the well. And as soon as they finished, water would shoot up high as pillars, then discharge itself into great streams and rivers that separated the camp into different parts, so that anyone visiting another camp would have to do so with ships. This continued for years, until Miriam got sick and died. Immediately after her death, the well immediately dried up. And again, the Israelites had returned to ground zero. It was this moment that forever changed the trajectory of Moses' life and sojourn to the Promised Land. Sit tight, because the story just got interesting. After Miriam's death and burial in Kadesh, the Israelites continued their journey through the desert. However, it wasn't long before they found themselves in the desert of Zin, and once again, they started complaining to Moses and Aaron about the lack of water, just as they had done before. They quarreled with Moses, expressing their frustration and questioning why they were brought to the desert to die of thirst. This was a really trying time for Moses and his brother, so in response, they went before the tent to meet and prostrate themselves before God, seeking his guidance on how to provide water for the people. Eventually, God answered them, instructing Moses and Aaron to gather the assembly and speak to the rock, and water would come forth for the community and their livestock. But guess what Moses did? Instead of speaking to the rock as God commanded, Moses became angry with the Israelites and struck the rock twice with his staff, saying, "Listen, you rebels, must we bring you water out of this rock?" Water did come out of the rock, fulfilling God's promise. However, God was displeased with Moses' disobedience and lack of faith, and in that anger, he declared that although Moses would see the promised land from a distance, he would not be allowed to enter it. That had sealed the fate of Moses, and nothing could be done about it. So, at the age of 120 years, after surveying the promised land from Moab, Moses died and was buried by God himself in an unknown place. That was how the search for his tomb began. You will be amazed by the search efforts that were put into finding Moses' tomb. So, sit tight as we reveal details of how this groundbreaking breakthrough came about. The journey just got interesting. The search for Moses' tomb. Based on records in the book of Deuteronomy, Moses was buried in Moab, in the valley opposite Beth Peor.
Moses, the Almighty's servant, died there in Moab, just as the Almighty said he would. The Almighty buried Moses in a valley near the town of Beth Peor.
In another account, he was buried in Mount Nebo, located in Jordan, while some theologians said he never died but was taken directly to heaven, just like Enoch and Elijah in the Bible. The question is, which of these is true? We will find out in the revelation we're about to make, so pay rapt attention. Remember, at the beginning of this video, we made mention of Miriam's well playing a role in the discovery of Moses' tomb, right? Well, this is that point where those dots will be connected and where you will make sense of the whole picture we have been trying to paint, so don't go away. To find the elusive grave of this great patriarch of faith, an archaeologist, Josh Gates, together with his team, set to the depths of the Sea of Galilee in search of answers. He chose the Sea of Galilee for this search because it is located in the same region where Moses and the Israelites traveled from Egypt to the Promised Land. Thrilled to be part of the data collection expedition, Josh Gates intently watched as the team used a seismic air gun to send shockwaves through the water, scanning the lake bed for an unusual feature that could be connected to either the biblical Miriam's well or even this elusive tomb. Eager to get data, Josh urged the team to repeatedly fire the air gun, and so they did, repeatedly setting off charges in a circle around the mysterious underwater feature they had located. Amazed that the seismic survey generated enough data for the scientists to create a detailed 3D image on the computer, they set to work. Examining the model, Professor Marco, the lead scientist on ground, pointed out that the structure continued under the accumulated sediment, which indicated the feature was built at least 4,000 years ago, during the Bronze Age time frame of the Exodus story.
Oh, it continues under the sediment here.
It continues under the sediment, so
Wow.
it means that the sediment accumulated after the structure was built.
Right.
Based on this sediment accumulated above the base, we assume that it was built about 4,000 years ago minimum, or perhaps even earlier.
Which inadvertently meant they were in the right historical neighborhood. With this, they knew they were at the right spot, so they examined further, only to be shocked by what they saw. The 3D image revealed an unnatural, constructed formation on the otherwise flat lake floor. Surprised, one of the expedition team members acknowledged they were not natural formations, as it looked like a structure that someone or a group of people who transported these basalt stones from its original site deliberately erected. This struck a chord in Josh, so turning to one of the archaeologists, he said the structure reminded him of a cairn, an artificial stone mound covering a tomb underneath. And so, he asked if it was possible that there was something buried inside, and to his utter shock, the scientist agreed, even stating that it was the only untouched tomb of this kind in that entire region. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? Has Moses' tomb been found? At this point, the dots started connecting, and while mused that the structure was not a magic rock, Josh was hopeful that it could still be connected to the story of Exodus. To further emphasize what he felt, Josh pointed at how this structure could turn out to be Miriam's well that may have been covered by water years after its disappearance. This was definitely a possibility worth exploring further. So clearly excited by the implications, Josh said the next step would be to investigate exactly what lies inside, as he suspected it could be the untouched tomb of an ancient figure, possibly Moses, which would be a groundbreaking discovery. Josh noted there was still much work to be done, but this was just the right stroke in the right direction of unraveling this age-long mystery. But was Josh able to find this mystery tomb? Let's find out in the next chapter. Moses' tomb, found. To find the exact location of this burial place, which has rendered archaeologists restless for centuries, experts had to fall back to accounts in the holy texts to see if they could find clues or match any of these biblical sites to their modern location. Using the biblical account, these experts made no headway because though the book of Deuteronomy stated that he was laid to rest in a valley across from Beth Peor, exploration of the area had shown no signs of his grave. Having met a dead end from the biblical perspective, these experts turned to Islamic tradition. Perhaps they could find a clue from their holy texts or the sayings of Prophet Muhammad. Was this approach successful? Let's find out. The significance of Moses, or Musa as he is known in Islamic tradition, extends far beyond the Judeo-Christian world. He is mentioned over 130 times in the Quran, more than any other prophet, which is proof of his immense importance in Islamic teachings. To start with, religious scholars said the secrecy surrounding Moses' burial was intentional, as they believed that the concealment of his final resting place was to prevent any form of idolatry or excessive veneration at his gravesite. But quite early in the quest for an answer, they encountered their first shock. Though the Quran's narrative of the event matches the biblical account, emphasizing Moses' mission to lead the Israelites and his role as a recipient of God's divine messages, it offered a starkly different perspective on the location of Moses' final resting place. And this on its own was a huge challenge. While a part of the texts narrated how Prophet Muhammad said he saw Moses praying over his grave near the red dunes of Rum in Jordan, another section of this same Quran claims Moses was buried closer to Jericho in the West Bank. And guess what? This was where one of the most revered sites associated with Moses within Islamic culture, which they called the tomb of Nabii Musa in the West Bank, a center of pilgrimage and deep veneration for centuries, was situated. This, again, after the discovery of what seemed to be the well of Miriam, was a very significant piece of evidence that brought us closer to understanding more about one of history's most significant figures and discovering his mysterious resting place. As renowned explorer Josh Gates wrapped up his expedition at the Sea of Galilee, he decided to visit this ancient and revered religious site, which, by now, had been paraded by the Islams as the purported final resting place of the biblical figure Moses. And boy, was he in for the surprise of the century. Eager to uncover the mysteries surrounding this hallowed ground, Gates set out on a journey deep into the rugged Palestinian territories. Eventually, he arrived at a remote and isolated compound nestled amidst the rolling, arid hills of the West Bank. This site, known as Nabii Musa, immediately captivated Gates' curiosity. As he stepped through the entryway, he was greeted by Professor Tawfiq Dadli, a local archaeologist who had dedicated much of his career to studying the complex history and religious significance of this enigmatic location. After the initial pleasantries, Gates wasted no time in making known the purpose of his visit. Stating how Moses had met his end on the opposite side of this valley, Mount Nebo, according to the biblical accounts, Gates wondered how this place had come to be associated with his burial. To clear his curiosity, Professor Dadley explained that the connection between Nabii Musa and the tomb of Moses dates back centuries. He stated that this site had been revered as the final resting place of the prophet Moses since at least the 4th century AD, when a church was built here to commemorate its sacred status. Dadley also pointed out that the site's name, Nabii Musa, which translates to Prophet Moses, was a clear indication of the deep-rooted religious traditions tied to this location. Intrigued, Gates probed further, inquiring if there was any tangible archaeological evidence to support these long-standing beliefs. In response, Dadley stated that the oldest physical marker they had was an inscription found near the entrance to the mausoleum, which was dated 1269 AD. It was with this that the founders established the site as the accepted burial place of Moses. But Gates was not satisfied with this response, so he probed further. Noting that this date was still several centuries removed from the estimated lifetime of the biblical figure, he asked if they were talking about a tradition that emerged over 1,000 years after Moses himself. And to his amusement, Dadley nodded in acknowledgement and conceded that this was true. The professor explained that before the 13th century, written records became scarce, but the mausoleum was built based on the few records of that time that pointed to the existence of his grave in the area, which inadvertently means there is no concrete archaeological proof before the 13th century that proves he was buried there. Still, Josh was resolute to get all the answers he needed to get about this place, so he, probing further, asked whether the tomb had ever been opened or examined, but you won't believe what happened next. As soon as he did, Dadley's tone shifted, explaining that as an archaeologist, he was naturally driven to uncover the physical evidence and piece together the historical realities of sites like this. However, since the tomb was considered a sacred space by the Muslim community, they were wary of having it disturbed. So, while he would love to be able to look inside and study what lies within it, the reality was that they had never opened it, and likely never would. Which shows that in the end, some things just had to be left to the realm of belief and spiritual significance. This was a first, but despite the lack of tangible archaeological confirmation, Gates could see how this remote, evocative site had become a revered pilgrimage destination for followers of the Islamic faith, who continued to flock here from as far as Indonesia and India to honor what they believed to be the final resting place of the prophet Moses. After this visit, Gates couldn't help but feel a sense of reverence at how a single site became the intersection between history, faith, and mystery in a very thought-provoking way. But without evidence of Moses in this tomb, should we still believe that Moses was truly buried there? Will we ever find his tomb? Could it truly be that he was taken directly to heaven, just like Prophet Elijah? Let's know your thoughts on this in the comments section. If you enjoyed this and would love to see the subsequent development on this, kindly subscribe, like, and share this video. Peace be unto you.